Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel. This is Daniel Teaches, the psychology student bringing you his perspective from his lectures, his readings, and personal anecdotes to share with you so we can learn, grow, and be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. Today we're going to talk about the Great Resignation. So at this point, many of you have already heard of the Great Resignation. For the people who don't know what that is, it's essentially, I'm going to be talking about the psychology behind why so many people have left their jobs and why it's actually a super logical thing to do. Like I've been hearing, oh, this is crazy. Why would people do such a thing? But if you really look at the beginning and how this started, it would be weird if people didn't quit their jobs. I want to take you back a few years ago when COVID first started. If you live in Canada, you may have been eligible for something known as CERB. And this was kind of like a certain amount of money that the government would pay you to not go to work. Early on, we had no idea about the severity of COVID. And they said, look, we're going to close all these places down. So you're not going to be able to go to work, so you're not going to be able to make money. However, you still have to pay for your utilities, you still have to pay for insurance, mortgage, and all that stuff. So they said, we'll work something out. The compromise is we will send you money as long as you don't work too many hours. And this way, you don't have to feel in danger. And you can still pay your utilities, your mortgage, your insurance, and all that good stuff. You can still buy groceries. Now, eventually what happened was, jobs started to open up again. And people started returning. But here's the thing, not everyone returned. There was a large group of people who did not return to their jobs. And you sit back and you go, well, why is that? The first ideology is, well, you're lazy, right? You're lazy, you're a snowflake. You'd rather just sit at home and make money and rather than go out and get the job done yourself. It's like, oh, I understand where that mindset comes from. I want you to imagine being a student, okay? And you're a student and you're working your butt off 20, 30, 40 hours a week for minimum wage, all right? You're balancing that amongst your studies, and God forbid you want to go out with your friends here and there. Not to mention, I live in one of the most expensive cities in the second biggest country in the world, so good luck paying groceries and rent and all that other stuff. And all of a sudden the government says, look, we're going to pay you X amount of money every 2 weeks. And you don't have to work 40 hours a week for a boss that you don't like doing a job that you find meaningless. So now you're sitting there going, well, look, I want to make a little bit less than I would, but I have my time. And the real beauty of it was, I think the world almost stopped in a sense. You got to sit down and go, what is my time worth? How valuable am I as a person and as a citizen to my society? I should be getting paid. The pay that I receive, in theory, should be a direct reflection of the value and the skills/service that I can provide to the community. If, no disrespect, all you're doing is holding up the sign at Subway, you don't need too much skill to do that. What that means is you are easily replaceable, right? They can fire you like that. They're not worried about someone else coming and taking your job. But if you're a heart surgeon, that is a skill that is very specialized. There are not many people who can do that. So all of a sudden now your value increases, right? Not to mention the impact of your job, right? You're saving someone's life as opposed to looking at marketing in a sense. And look, if you're holding a sign listening to this, man, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. You're a student, you got to start somewhere, go for it. But if we just look at it in relation of replaceability and adding value to a company, we can see that certain positions, look, if there's a company, like there was this crazy video of this guy firing like 900 employees over Zoom. I don't know if you've seen that. Google it. It was unbelievable. And he was doing this whole, it hurts me more than it hurts you, right? And look, I understand that. Look, if you're a business owner, you're getting taxed like crazy. You have to pay for utilities and all the overhead that goes into a business. And you're going, look, I'm losing money. The unfortunate part is, how many of those business owners say, you know what, I'm going to take a pay cut so I don't have to literally fire the majority of my employees versus, well, I'm not going to take a pay cut. Do you know who's going to get a pay cut first or get let go? The poor guy holding the sign at Subway, right? Or the cashier, the low-level, entry-level jobs. And look, I understand that. If you're looking at it from skill and essentialness to the company itself, it makes sense, right? You start low to the people who you can afford to let go. And hopefully you don't let go of those super key people in the company. So let's say you're a student or a young person, or you know what, you're a single mom of two who is trying to hold down a job. You've been let go, now you're getting paid by the government. Now the government stops paying you and you're thinking, do I want to go back to this job? An important thing to recognize is supply and demand, and also scarcity. If the year was, excuse me, 1972, and you're thinking about getting fired from a job, this job is all you have. This job is all that exists. Why? Because you are not aware of the other jobs that may be around you. There is no social media. There is no Google. There is no internet. You can't go into Indeed and do jobs near me and jobs in the next town. And well, if Vancouver, isn't hiring, well, how about Toronto or how about Montreal? No. I mean, you could go to another town, but you're going in blind. You don't know if anyone's hiring. You can't send emails in 1970. You got to go door to door, just knocking, hoping that you find the owner. So what's happened is, in my opinion, there was a point when an employer could get away with overworking their employees, not paying them in overtime, doing things that are borderline unethical, borderline illegal, not wanting them to get unionized, right? And if that employee has nowhere else to go, well, now there's a huge demand, right? He's saying, look, I need to work, and I don't know if there's any other job available for me. So he'll work your garbage conditions. But if that same employee now, when he leaves his job, has got 10 other jobs to do, and 8 of them are remote, you don't think they're going to quit their job for a better job if they can? Now, look, a lot of people can't, right? A lot of people are not in a position to leave. This brings me to my next point. One thing that a lot of people did was they looked to increase their value and thus increasing the profit that they could make. Earlier, I said in a perfect world, the amount of money that you make should be a reflection of the value that you offer to society, right? So if you're making millions and millions of dollars, you're probably like a CEO of some company, and this company offers this great service to X amount of people, and it impacts the life satisfaction by whatever. So how do you increase your value? It's actually extremely practical, where you can learn a skill or you can learn a knowledge. One of the easiest ways to do that is courses. There are a bunch of online courses that you could take. There are courses that your job would even pay you to take. They're like, hey, look, we're going to pay you $200 to take this online course on financing. It's going to last you 4 months. Once you complete that course, show us the certification and we will increase your pay. So when I say increase value, it sounds very abstract, but when you boil it down, it says, how can you increase the level of knowledge/skills that you can provide? Right? The big one is, well, school, right? It's getting a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD. There's a lot of jobs that I've seen where they say, look, you can apply with a master's degree or you can apply with a PhD, and salary is negotiable, right? It doesn't take a genius to find out that if you apply with a PhD, the likelihood of them paying you more than someone applying with a master's is huge. I had a lot of high school teachers who were not making the same amount of money. And one of the teachers told me that the biggest factor in who makes more money than who is who has spent time longer in school. So sometimes you have people who take the minimum educational requirements to become a high school teacher. Sometimes you have people who are taking extra requirements. So they do that and then they go on to get a diploma afterwards or even a master's degree afterwards, and they become high school teachers, and guess what? They end up getting paid more money. That doesn't mean you're a better person necessarily. It doesn't mean you're going to be a more skilled worker, but they are paying you for the credential, right? They're paying you for the experience, and the thought is that, that you will have more knowledge. So what a lot of people did during this great resignation, if you will, is they took time to work on themselves, and they said, well, look, what can I do to make myself more valuable? How can I improve my resume? Can I do an online course? Can I do a in-person course? Do you know how important first aid is and how nice that looks on a resume? Maybe you can hit a first aid course out of the way. I believe to do one standard first aid CPRC, I want to say it's 2 days, if I'm not mistaken, 8 hours Saturday, 8 hours Sunday, boom. That's increasing your value. Is it not? Right? You're increasing your knowledge. Now, again, look, those are the easier things to do, and I'm focusing on the ones that you could get out of the way faster. But obviously, the more influential or impactful ones are the ones that have more weight to them, right? So if you've gone and studied something for a year and a half, a diploma, a degree, master's degree, PhD, well, those are going to have a whole lot more value, right? Because the assumption is that you've learned a skill that is not easy to learn, right? Or that takes time to learn. They're almost paying you for that investment, right? They're paying you for those student loans that you took when you went and you studied, whatever you studied. So now the question becomes, you get fired from your job or you leave your job. You take time to think about what your value is and how much money you should be given. And that is a very tricky thing to figure out. How do you find out what your worth is? Well, you might look at it, you say, well, Daniel, I want to be a cashier at Save On Foods. Like, how much money do other cashiers at Save On Foods get? And then you kind of balance it out. And you go, all right, well, I should be making this amount of money. For my content creators, for my bloggers, for my YouTube creators, this is going to be trickier for you because it is not as simple. Rates differ, right? What do you do when someone says, hey, Daniel, how much do you charge for sponsorship in one of your YouTube videos? I don't know, right? How much is too much? You know, you set the worth for that, right? How much do you charge for a collab? How much do you charge to wear, you know, a Nike shirt in your next podcast? Like, these are things that you're going to have to figure out. And this is a constant negotiation, right? And the companies want to get you as cheaply as possible. And in theory, what you want to do is you want to sell yourself for as expensively as possible, within reason, right? So it's, you know, so it's still ethical and you still respect your standards. But trust me, if a company could get you to work for them for free, they absolutely would. Like, when I hear that someone's working for minimum wage, what I actually hear is, if we could have you working for $0, we would, but that's illegal. So we're literally going to just be 1 inch above the line. I'm not surprised that there's a big resignation. I'm actually glad that if people have the opportunity to, they can take time and think, you know, what do I want to do with my time? Where do I want to contribute to? There are two things that are essential when looking at any job. One of them is autonomy. We know that people experience greater life satisfaction when they believe they have at least a small level of autonomy in what they do. Minimum is small. This could be a coach or an instructor who's got some level of freedom in terms of the lesson plan that they want to put out. This could be some sort of manager or supervisor, again, who's got that autonomy of how to approach a task. This could be a person who's just in a creative role. You know, they could be self-employed, but the beautiful aspect of being self-employed is it's completely up to you, right? How many days you want to work, what projects you want to accept, what projects you don't want to accept. So autonomy is a huge factor when looking at jobs. A second incredible factor is looking at meaning. People value jobs that they believe is contributing something, that is meaningful to them. Now look, meaning is subjective, right? I'm not saying everybody has to become a heart surgeon. You could be a dishwasher at a restaurant, but if you really care for your job, and people are going, Daniel, how is that possible? You can't, believe me. If you believe that you play an integral role in the restaurant, and that if you just quit and they didn't have any dishwashers, like they'd be backed up and that'd be a problem, that could be meaningful to you. So two huge things, folks, autonomy and meaning play incredibly big roles when we are looking at jobs, so it's important to look out for those things. The jobs that increase our chances for cardiovascular diseases, such as heart attacks, are jobs that are very stressful, so that we don't have much autonomy in, and that we don't believe provide too much meaning. So for example, I saw something that being a waiter and waitress increases the chances of you having a cardiovascular disease exponentially. Being a waiter or waitress has almost as much stress, I read this somewhere, take this with a grain of salt, as working as a fireman. So going out and setting fires can almost be now you're going to say, Daniel, I don't believe that. That's fine. But I just want to demonstrate this idea of, if you're a waiter or waitress, you don't have too much autonomy in what you do. They give you the food and you go give to them. You can have a little bit of small talk, but in the sense it's very stressed. It's very time sensitive. People are going to speak poorly to you. You're getting paid garbage wage, right? You depend on tips. Maybe they tip well, maybe they don't tip at all. You don't have any say in what you do or how you go about it, right? The food is put on a plate, you put the plate on the table, that's it. So there's a lot of stress in jobs like that. Another factor to consider with the Great Resignation is we're going remote, right? So now you're even going, look, why should I go into the office if I can do my job remotely? There's a psychologist that I was talking to, one of my professors, and he said, look, ever since I've gone remotely with some clients, and like they live in the vicinity, they're like a 10-minute, 15-minute car drive away. He said, we're just gonna stay online once the pandemic's over. It's easier for the both of us. You know, they don't have to get in the car and drive over if there's traffic, if there's construction, right? And you might say, well, Dana, that's lazy. It's like, hold on a minute. What if you have to take What if it takes time for you to get to where you want to get to? What if you have a half an hour drive to get to work? You say, well, Daniel, what's half an hour, right? Well, you go, well, look, 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. That's an hour a day. Monday to Friday, that's 5 hours a week. You do that for 4 weeks. That's 20 hours a month. 20 hours a month. Now, let's see if you've been working there for 5 months. You just spent 100 hours on travel. 100 hours is a long time, folks. Do you know what you could do with 100 extra hours in 5 months? 20 hours a month, 100 hours for 5 months. Who was it that said if you do one thing for 1 hour every day for the next 3 years, you can become an expert at it? I don't know who said that, but it's the idea of like, dude, those minutes add up, right? And if you could be at home and do it remotely and you could save money on gas, doesn't that just sound like the more convenient and smart thing to do? Now, you might say, well, Daniel, I like the atmosphere of work and I like seeing my coworkers. And it's like, fair enough, dude. I'm not saying we should all go online, but I'm saying it's definitely an option. And I don't think it's going to go away by any time soon. It might just become a complete optional part of every job, like within reason, if the job allows it. For example, if you're a counselor, I could see almost every single counselor having just an online option, saying, hey, I can meet you in my office or I can do Zoom. You know, I'm in one part of Vancouver, you're in a total other part of Vancouver, like there's like an hour, 2 hour drive between us, dude, let's just Zoom. It's so much easier. And I think that's going to only enhance the client and counselor experience and make it easier for people to talk to you. There's a clip of clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson being asked by this guy, and this guy said, look, he said, what is the problem with women today? What's wrong with women today? And the psychologist looks at him and goes, what kind of a question is that? He goes, let me get this straight. If you're a young man and you get rejected by women, like, who has the problem here exactly? Is it all the women or is it you? Like, really? Like, you think you're this perfect, like, being or this gem of a man and all the women are messed up? Come on, dude. So the reason I bring that up is that's a bit of a narrative that I hear with employers. There are some employers who go, what's wrong with all these employees? Why? They're just so sensitive. They're just snowflakes. This generation's entitled. They don't want to work for it. They just want to sit at home and get paid. So then I'm sitting here going, so all the employees are entitled? There's nothing wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with the wage that you're paying your employees? There's nothing wrong with the work culture, the communication, the work environment, the amount of work that you put on them? Their vacation time, it's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. They're just too entitled. Like, oh, that's interesting. There's a concept in psychology known as self-serving bias, and that's when something good happens, we blame ourselves for the success, but if something bad happens, we blame other people. So if I'm an employer and let's say the COVID happens, a bunch of people resign, or I have to fire them, and then I'm surprised why they don't come back, I'm less likely to go, you know what, man, maybe it's time I increase my wage because I haven't done that in about 10 years. Maybe the work environment isn't as healthy as it could be. Maybe I shouldn't be assigning so much work, right? But we don't think that, do we? The majority of people are going to think, man, they're just entitled. Look, they're lazy. Back when I was 20 years old, I would work this many hours, and I said, please and thank you, and I didn't. He's talking back to me? Why can't you just work minimum wage and keep your mouth shut? What's wrong with this new generation? So you can clearly see there's a difference of psychology in how we see things. If the company does well, it's because I am brash and bold and I'm well beyond my years. If the company does poorly, my employees are really letting me down. These guys just aren't as disciplined as I thought they were, right? So self-serving bias, right? We look at information which enhances our current selves, and when something bad happens, we magnify the external events or the external causes surrounding that topic. So the Great Resignation is actually a super normal and logical thing to happen. It's like, of course that would happen, right? It's fascinating what happens when you say, hey, look, you've got options. You don't like your boss? Here are 10 other places you could work. Theoretically, it's like, well, what are the gateways to working at those places? Look at your resume. What are they looking for? Oh, they're looking for first aid experience? Great. You can do that, right? So something such a very abstract idea, it can get very practical. Now, mind you, I'm oversimplifying. you've got bills, you don't have the money or the time for a first aid course right now. But simply making you aware of these things, that these things are there and they exist. And I would recommend anybody, if you're not working right now, or if you do have a job, go online, go to Indeed.com or Indeed.ca, start looking at different jobs in your area. Mess around, start filtering things. It's always good to have backups. It's always good to have things in mind, whether it's filtered in terms of how much salary, whether it's filtered in terms of like, I will only do jobs that allow me to work remotely, whether it's filtered like it has to be involved with like human resources. You've got options, folks. I'm not saying you're going to be able to waltz from one job to another, but it's important to be aware that those other options exist and that you can keep your eye on what are they looking for in terms of criteria. Right? Maybe the criteria of one is a 6-month diploma and the criteria of another is a 2-year master's degree. Well, maybe you can do the diploma now, get this one job, start making money, save up, then start paying and doing that master's degree. 2 years down the line, you've got a way better job and you supported it by the diploma that you got earlier. Again, I'm oversimplifying, but if you really break it down, I believe it's possible. I believe it's entirely possible, and I don't want you to be taken advantage of. All right, everybody, we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode. Have an absolutely amazing day, and I hope to see you again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.